My name is Robin Sukhadia, and I am a first-year MFA student studying in the World Music Department, and my concentration is tabla, the drums of North India. My family is from North India, and I was born here, though, in the United States. So for me, I grew up listening to the sound of these beautiful drums, but I never had the opportunity to study them until I moved to California. And I moved to San Francisco, and I went to a concert of a great master tabla player, Zakir Hussain, and I saw him perform. And after the concert, I met him backstage, and I asked him, "Where can I study this music?" And he said, "You should go meet Pandit Swapan Chaudhary at the Ali Akbar College of Music." So I went there and I began my studies, and 6 years later, I have followed him down here to CalArts to continue my studies and go deeper into this tradition. I had been I had been studying tabla for the last 6 years, just as a recreational hobby, I guess you could say. But getting more and more opportunities to perform and to teach, primarily teach. And from that experience, I decided that maybe it was time to think about getting a higher degree in this area of study. And so I talked to my guru, my teacher, Pandit Swapan Chaudhary, and he encouraged me to think about CalArts. So I thought about coming into this after doing my own study, and then after 6 years of that kind of exposure, and finally meeting a great teacher, that the idea to come down here kind of became a reality. And so once I came down here, I really looked at the study and decided that yes, this is the path I want to take. The other side of it is that while I'm studying this in a classical way and looking at it from a classical perspective, I'm also combining it with new technology. Bringing in my PowerBook here and using the technology and the software that I've learned to do electronic music and kind of converging it with this tradition. So the decision to come to CalArts was somewhat based on the fact that CalArts is a really progressive environment, and I've been able to meet artists and musicians here who are thinking outside the box. And I think that tabla is such a rich and deep tradition, and in order to apply it sensitively to new technology, you kind of have to look at it from a classical perspective. So I get that classical perspective here, but I also get exposure to what's happening next in terms of technology and in terms of applications of this tradition to technology. I'm very interested in performance, for sure. Taking this classical tradition and bringing it on stage with other kinds of collaborations and artists, such as dancers, musicians, drama, theater, film. But even more importantly, I'm really interested in seeing how this music can teach people how to think about this world in a more compassionate way. I work for a foundation right now called Project Ahimsa, and what we do is we use classical traditions and cultures and the music and arts of those cultures and use that to heal communities affected by violence. So I'm very interested in working with children. I'm already doing a lot of workshops with at-risk youth using these traditional kinds of drums. So CalArts is kind of interesting in that way too, is that I've been able to interface with different kinds of musicians who are also interested in social justice and the political issues that we're facing in the current situation that our country is in. So I'm not just interested in performance, but also using this art form as a means to address social injustice. The tabla is an instrument from North India, as I said, and as a result, it's a reflection of years and centuries of the exchange of culture on that subcontinent, the South Asian subcontinent. As a result, the instrument has a lot of influence from the Persian and Islamic empires. It also has a lot of influence from the Hindu empires that were flourishing on the subcontinent for the last century, thousands of years, really. Tabla itself is only 300 years old, which is actually relatively young in comparison to the much larger history of drumming on the subcontinent of South Asia, which goes back thousands of years. The main difference between tabla and other drums is this black spot. This black spot is what gives tabla that beautiful resonance, and that resonance the resonance of the tabla is representative of the sounds that are coming out of this black spot, which is made of tiny iron filings and rice paste. So this black spot, which is called the gob, is made of rice paste and iron filings, and those iron filings vibrate when the head is struck, and that's what creates that beautiful resonance. So let me play a little bit for you, and you can see the difference. One thing is that if the black spot wasn't there, it would sound like this. So it sounds more like a bongo. And a bongo, as you know, doesn't have a black spot. Neither does conga or some of the other drums. But this black spot is the distinctive marker of tabla. So the tabla also is different in that it doesn't have a hole in the bottom. It's a solid piece of wood with the membrane. This is a goat skin head with goat skin straps. The wood is variable. This is a beautiful mahogany wood, but you find rosewood and all kinds of different kinds of woods. These are pegs that tighten and loosen the head of the drum. This is called the tabla. This is called the baya. Tabla literally means right, and this means left, baya. So the left hand plays the baya, although it can be switched around. But the main distinction on the baya is that, first of all, it's larger, and also that it's made of nickel, or sometimes copper, and in the old days, clay. And the size of it allows it to have that beautiful, deep bass sound. And in some philosophies of tabla, they believe that this represents the female and this represents the male, and the male being of lower frequency and the female being of higher frequency. And when you learn tabla, you always are seeking balance between these two energies. So, for example, da gena da gedina gena tata data da gena tata gena data da getuna gena da gena da gedina gena. So what I just did there is I recited a composition and then I played it. And the important thing in tabla is that there's an oral tradition behind the drums. The tradition is so old that the old masters would recite, and they had a vocal language that represented every single note on the drum. So if I say da gena da gedina gena, I'm going like this: da gena da gedina gena. So da gena da gedina gena. So every single note that's played on the drum has a syllable attached to it. And so two tabla players can play with one another without even playing the drum. Literally, they can speak to one another. It allows you to build beautiful complexity into your rhythm. So you can go dinna din din naka dinna din din naka dinna din din naka dinna din din naka dinna din din naka. So in terms of improvisation, tabla is full of a lot of possibilities, and you can instantly listen to a rhythm and translate it into tabla bowls, and by translating it into the language, you're able to play and to then take it to the next step, which is adding your own ornaments to it. So that's kind of why tabla is enjoying a great deal of popularity right now. In terms of fusion music, you're hearing tabla in hip-hop, you're hearing it in drum and bass, you're hearing it in all kinds of different electronic music. It's an instrument that's really just beginning to become popular in this country, and that's thanks to great masters like Zakir Hussain, Swapan Chaudhary, and many, many, many other tabla players who are out there practicing this art form. Well, first of all, you have to remember tabla was a classical art form. Classical meaning that it was protected by the higher classes of society. Only certain people were allowed to play these drums. You had to be born into a family. You had to be a male. You certainly had to be, you had to have access to the great teachers, who were usually parts of the elaborate courts in the olden days of South Asian culture, the Mughal Empire or these different emperors. They had their court musicians. So not common people couldn't learn this drum. Now, since that system has collapsed, I'm talking about the system of classical caste system and that kind of thing is slowly dissolving in India. The drums themselves are also they're more accessible to more people. The great masters have actually begun to live all over around the world. So teachers like Pandit Swapan Chaudhary, who's here at CalArts, is now accessible to anyone who wants to learn this music. That's a new phenomenon that's only happened in the last 50 to 100 years of this drum. For a long time, only certain people could learn this music. Now it's becoming accessible to great numbers of people, thanks to people like Swapan Chaudhary, Zakir Hussain, Ali Akbar Khan, who is a great sarod master. His mandate in life was to open this music up to as many people who could learn it as possible. So I wouldn't say that some of them, there are fewer masters now than there were. What I would say is there are more people learning the music now. As a result, the audiences are becoming more educated, and they're also transcending cultures. It's not just Indian people who understand this music. It's all different cultures, and the music is transcending those boundaries. So you're finding a whole generation of people coming up that are listening and learning from this drum and applying it to their rhythms, and also becoming great tabla players in their own right. You're also seeing more women learning this instrument, which for many, many, many years was only accessible to men. So there's a whole generation of Indian women masters and non-Indian women masters coming up through the ranks learning tabla. So you could say that they're actually a whole new breed of masters that are kind of coming up through the ranks. And the other thing is that the people learning tabla now have so much exposure to so many different kinds of music. You know, they're not just coming at it like, oh, I'm only here for tabla. They're coming at it as, I'm a jazz musician, or I'm an electronic musician, or I'm a samba artist, and I want to know tabla so I can bring that into what I do. So the music is in some ways compounding and becoming more powerful, I would say. I think that classical, the music is certainly evolving. Classical North Indian music has changed a great deal since the last 50 to 75 years. Over that period of time, because of technology, because of the fact that the old colonial system that was in effect in India has totally collapsed, and musicians are on their own. A lot of them have to figure out new ways to survive and figure out new ways to find audiences and that kind of thing. So the music has changed, meaning the format of classical music has changed. Maybe there's more emphasis on percussion, more tabla solos, less melodic things. Maybe there's extensions of ragas. Maybe there's shortening of ragas. There's also the idea that ragas are supposed to be played at certain times of day, and this is a very, very important concept in tabla, this is a very important concept in classical North Indian music. But because of the fact that artists are playing in different venues all around the world, and their time constraints and this and that, so sometimes ragas are played at the wrong time of day. So in that respect, you could say that the whole format of classical Indian music has somewhat been dumbed down or changed, because audiences are not as savvy, or they may not understand the music as much. So they're relaxing the rules around this classical format. And so the whole paradigm of classical Indian music is changing. But I would also say that because tabla players like myself are learning this in a way that's different from the old days, which is I'm only doing classical music. I mean, I'm looking at it so I can use it to apply with my electronic music, or, a saxophone player down the hall, or let's say a samba artist. I'm having to think about tabla in a different way. And I'm still applying my classical knowledge, but I'm having to think about it in a different paradigm. So, yeah, my approach to the study is changing, and I guess the way I present tabla is changing. But I try to be as respectful of the tradition behind it as possible at all times. So, and the best way to do that is to continue learning from the great masters who are steeped in this tradition. I have to say I've been pleasantly surprised by the caliber of musicians and the faculty here at CalArts. I came here thinking that I would have a lot of time just to focus on tabla, and that's all I'm going to do. But I came down here and I began my studies, and I realized that there's so many amazing things going on here in terms of learning about different technologies, learning about new applications of music, certainly listening to great visiting artists who are here all the time, coming from different parts of the world, and having an opportunity to study with them even for a little bit. And I found that has all kind of influenced my perception of CalArts, which I'm now realizing is really this very, very thick and progressive environment of ideas and creativity, and really pushing the limits of your imagination and bringing that back to whatever your particular discipline is, and trying to use that to teach the community and keep refertilizing the community. So I think that I found that coming to CalArts has actually been somewhat of a mind-blowing experience, because it is overwhelming at times, and I guess you could say that's confusing. But when I say it's overwhelming, I mean that there's so much to learn here, and if you're willing to take that knowledge and absorb even fractions of it and bring it into what you can do, then I think you're going to find yourself opening yourself to new opportunities. One of the most exciting things about coming here is the networking that I've been able to get out of being at CalArts. First of all, the proximity to Hollywood and the studios and the industry in LA has definitely opened my mind to how can I apply tabla to what's happening in the mainstream. Second thing is just the faculty here has been incredibly supportive of what I want to do, whether it's taking tabla, learning new software on my computer and applying different effects to what I do. I've been able to find professors here who are really open to seeing how we can converge these two different things, technology and tradition. I've also been able to connect with industry leaders who want to support some of the things I want to do in terms of using this tradition to help address social injustice. One example is I've been able to connect with Remo Drum Company because of my contacts here in the World Music Department. And now Remo is interested in supporting some of our initiatives around the world, which is donating musical instruments to children in India who are suffering from violence. That's just one example of a very tangible networking opportunity that I have because I'm here at CalArts. I think that I've found my experience here to be just very, very positive and one full of a lot of support. I think number one, you have to come to this environment willing to share your talents. I think that if you come here and you kind of retreat into the shadows and you just focus on yourself without giving back to the community, you're going to become very disenchanted or discouraged, because the CalArts community is one that's really based on sharing. And you can see that every day here. You see concerts going on, you see visiting professors coming and going, and you see other artists who come up to you and say, hey, I want to bring tabla into my hip-hop composition, or hey, I want to bring tabla, I'm doing this opera. If you're not willing to step beyond your four corners and say, hey, let me bring my art to your project, then you're going to find yourself not flourishing in this environment. The second thing I think that's important at CalArts is really being open to new ideas. There's a lot of things happening here that are outside the box, and that's the beauty of CalArts. It's a very experimental, very progressive environment. And if you're open to taking what you know and kind of pushing the boundaries and really working with the interdisciplinary nature of this community, then you're going to find yourself really accelerating in your own learning. And I think the third thing is to really be serious about what it is that you want to bring to the community. That means being a practitioner of your art and working on your art. It is easy to get distracted here because there's so much going on. But if you're willing to come here and say, I'm going to spend time really developing my craft and then take that to the next level, which is sharing it with the community, you're going to flourish here.